Well, I guess to start out, did you grew up here in Colorado, born and raised, correct?
Born and raised in Denver, and never been gone more than about 3 months in my whole life. So I've been lucky. No complaints about that. I love Denver, love Colorado. Like to travel, so it's always fun to come back home though when you do travel. I've seen other parts of the country that have been enjoyable, but year-round for our climate, for the beauty, for the variety of things that are here, Colorado will always be close to my heart, warm in my heart, and will always be my favorite place to end up.
What community did you grow up in?
East Denver,
Okay.
East and Southeast Denver. Was born at St. Joseph's Hospital and went to the Shorter Community AME Church, which was at one time located at 20th and Washington near downtown, and now it's at the intersection of Martin Luther King and Carl Boulevard, and been a member there. Not all my life. There was a period that I actually left for a while and went to a different church, but for the most part, it's been my church. Been a trustee there for the last 20 plus years, and am proud to claim to be a third generation member of that church. My mom and dad
Oh,
and
wow.
my dad's parents and his family, which is a pretty large one, all went to Shorter Church. A lot of them have since gone on, and just a few cousins now go there, other than myself and my immediate family.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
So, went to grade school in East Denver, Whittier Elementary School. From there to Wyman for 1 year, and then on to middle school. From there to Maury Middle School, I should say, and then on to East Denver High School. Then finally to University of Colorado and University of Denver both. So as you can tell, I'm a pretty solid Coloradoan. I died in the wool Colorado, and I've gone to all the schools here in Colorado. So.
What was elementary and middle school like? Was your school segregated then?
No, they were primarily African American with some mixture, but probably 85–90% African American. I should say at least Whittier Elementary School. Wyman was a mixture, and it might have been more 60–40 or 70–30 African American versus Anglo. East High School was predominantly Anglo. I think out of a graduating class of 800 plus, there might have been 25 to 30
Oh, wow.
African Americans, so we were in a vast minority. Wasn't a problem though. I enjoyed East High School. Matter of fact, of all of my educational experiences, my senior year at East was the greatest. I'll always remember it fondly. Color Day, which comes in May, this time of the year, where you're out for a day or two for track meets and that kind of thing. I can remember to this day the fun we had, and of course the prom, senior prom, and the dances and dinner before that. I had a good friend whose parents had a convertible, and we got to use it on a number of occasions, including prom night, and so it was something I always remember fondly, and the dates and the excitement of that, and dinner, and
Right.
showing off his parents' car, being the big guys, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
So.
So you feel like the environment, was pretty comfortable back then. Did you experience any sort of, racial discrimination or?
You know, Lena, I never really, I know it was there, but I never felt it, never was really confronted with it, never had any unpleasant experiences with it. I guess maybe I was just lucky, just never ran into those situations that result in it. Occasionally you'd hear a comment or two, but nothing really ever serious. I'd have to say, although I enjoyed high school a lot, that sometimes just the sheer numbers would kind of give you a kind of an ill feeling, but that was very seldom, to be honest with you, and nothing that I lost any sleep over, to be honest with you. So no, I didn't have any bad experiences with discrimination.
Wonderful.
Not only in high school, but when I got to college, I didn't really feel it there either. There's a group of us that hung out together and enjoyed the company, and just didn't have any problem, to be honest with you.
Oh.
Wasn't true for some of my friends, and I guess maybe it was just the way you approached it and how you got along with people that would set the tone for that a lot of times, I think, to be honest with you. Some of my best friends, in particular at the college level, were white, and had a good time with them. So, just wasn't an issue for me, to be honest with you.
Wonderful. So you grew up in a pretty political family, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I look back on those days when my dad was still living and very active in politics. I can remember as a 6 and 7-year-old carrying signs when he first started running for public office, and my two brothers and I. And we were always kind of somewhere nearby when he was running for office. He had the distinction of being in city politics and being a city councilman for 7 4-year terms, 28 years. There were probably
wow.
only 1 or 2 others that had that, could claim that honor and privilege before term limit set in, and where now you can only serve, I think it's 2 terms.
Oh, really?
So that he had the distinction of being in office before that, so he served as long as he could and wanted to. And it was challenging. There were there were good and bad moments of being in a family of a person in public office. It wasn't always easy running for re-election. Some of the elections themselves were hotly contested, and some of his opponents weren't always very nice. And it sometimes was not the most comfortable situation when you're running for office. I would think back as I watched the TV commercials and ads this last presidential campaign and thought back on my dad. And back in those days, they didn't have a lot of commercial, and even if they did, you couldn't afford it. But they had a lot of public debates, and some of those weren't too fun, and they could be challenging, and it reminded me of him when I watched some of the presidential debates and some of the things that was going on. His wasn't nearly as cantankerous, but it was bad enough.
Right.
It was bad enough. But all in all, it was a good experience. And for me to have lived through it, to have been the son of a city councilman as many years as he was in office, was I'd look at it on a positive side. It was a learning experience. Certainly has helped me in my endeavors, my business endeavors. I run into people all the time who knew my dad, and because of that association and because of their fondness for him, it's helped me, and I relish it, to be honest with you. Growing up in the neighborhood I did, I can remember another aspect of that. There were some precinct captains and precinct workers in the very neighborhood we lived in, and I delivered papers, so I got to deliver papers to those same people that were helping him stay in office.
Oh, nice.
And so it was good for me, and obviously good for my dad, and allowed him to kind of maintain a connection with some of those people through me as a youngster, trying to get their papers to him each day on time and not wet, and somewhere near their front porch as opposed to on the grass or somewhere. So I look on it as a very, very positive experience, and set the tone for me when I got into school later on. One of my favorite subject area was political science and history, and of course being in politics just feeds right into that, and vice versa. So it was to me one of the things I have to be thankful for, that I had the opportunity to be in a family that many years in public office.
So when you went to CU Boulder, is that what you started with, was history and political science?
I yes, went to CU Boulder, and I had what was called a distributive major back then, and it was the subject areas were political science, if I recall, economics, and I've forgotten the third area now. It kind of escapes me, but political science and the history subjects were always my favorites, even back when I was in middle school and up through high school and then into college. That area I always did well in it, enjoyed it, and both American history and European history and history outside of even the Western Hemisphere. So it has always been something that's fascinated me and been of interest. Was fortunate this past couple of years to have taken some trips to Europe, including a Baltic cruise.
Ooh.
which started off in Copenhagen, Denmark, and then we went to Tallinn, Estonia, which was one of the breakaway countries from the United Soviet Socialist Republic of Russia. And then from there we went to Berlin, Germany, and I got
Oh,
to see
wow.
the Berlin Wall and all of that history, although unfavorable, it's history nonetheless.
Uh-huh.
And then from there to St. Petersburg, Russia, and then over to Stockholm, Sweden, Helsinki, Finland, and then back to Copenhagen, Denmark. Loved it. Just a
Oh,
great,
wow.
great kind of like a chance now to see some of that history that I studied and relished in younger years. I got to see it with my own eyes, and although brief, for a brief period, got to experience some of the things that I read about and studied about and
Nice.
thought about. So always a favorite subject area for me.
Wonderful. What degree did you end up graduating with this year?
Ended up, strangely enough, even with that distributive major, getting enough hours and courses in education so I could teach at the middle school level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually entered the School of Education, and that ended up being my actual degree, even though I had all
okay.
these other courses. And there was a mixture of business along with that, because I wanted to teach business at the middle school level. And so I had some business courses scattered in that. So kind of really a diverse major, if you will, or a conglomeration of courses, but I liked them all, liked all the subject areas, and I think it's kind of served me well. Probably didn't take as much of those history classes that I would have liked at the college level, but enough that I even had some of that too to go along with it. So I actually got my degree, a Bachelor of Science in Education. And out of 100 and some hours, only about 25 to 30 of it was education, but I needed it to get the teaching certificate, and so I just decided to declare in the School of Education. So
Okay.
kind of a mixed bag, but an enjoyable one, and no regrets. I wouldn't do it differently if I had to start over today. So,
Did you move on to teach?
you know, that's an interesting thing. As soon as I graduated, and because I got the hours in education, I went a semester longer. And as soon as I got out, I was looking for a job. I'd gotten married in my senior year and needed a job. And Mountain Bell was hiring. And although I must have interviewed with a dozen to 20 companies, they looked good. And it was a reasonable starting salary for someone who didn't have any skills or any really specific training. And so in the meantime, I had applied with several of the schools in the area, including Jefferson County and DPS, Denver Public Schools. And so Denver Public Schools finally had a position for me. At the very middle school I went to, Maury Middle School.
Really? Wow.
And I had to go down and kind of find a way of saying that although I was still interested, I didn't want to do it right at that time. And I'll never forget the jaw on the guy's mouth dropping when I told him that, because I'd been bugging him and calling him and trying to get on. And when I declined the offer and the contract they wanted to give me, it was like they were flabbergasted that I would press them as hard as I did. And then at the time they had a job offering. So I didn't ever teach.
No.
And don't really regret it. Would have been nice. Kept my teaching certificate active for about 5 years, and my progress and promotions with the telephone company were rewarding, and so I didn't really look back. I should probably add that another thing that probably kept me from ever seriously considering teaching, after about 4 years out of undergraduate school, I got into law school and went to Denver University of Denver Law School and graduated, and so I have that little additional educational background that has been helpful to me. Never practiced. I was on the verge of deciding to practice when I left the telephone company, and this opportunity to acquire my own business came about, and so that kind of derailed that, and I got in it, and I've been there ever since. So
Wonderful.
that's when I became an owner of the Caldwell Kirk Mortuary back in 1984. So that's kind of my work history and the motivations to kind of end up where I did. Things just kind of developed so that I didn't always use everything I had, but it was good and rewarding. And again, I wouldn't probably do it differently if I could do it all over again. I'd probably choose the same path, maybe accidentally like it was, but wouldn't probably change a thing about it, Elena.
Yeah, Mountain Bell seemed to be a great job for you, great experience.
Yes, it was. What I did most of just a shade under 20 years I was there was in marketing, both as a line manager in sales, all the way up to a district sales manager position, and also spent 3 or 4 years on our corporate staff. And the beauty of that was that you got to direct the sales teams and then go back out into the field and put some of those words of wisdom, pearls of wisdom into use yourself.
Okay.
And so that whole career was rewarding in that sense, that I got to see both sides of the spectrum, both the actual working with business clients, if you will, and then working on our corporate staff, putting together policy, putting together training programs, putting together things to help those in the field achieve their results and achieve the objectives that they were put in place for them to meet the company goals and objectives.
Okay, wonderful.
So it was a good career. Again, I probably sound like a worn record by now, but I sometimes think that I've led kind of a charmed life where I've just ended up doing some things that really were rewarding, enjoyable, and one that I didn't necessarily have a vision, but they came about, and just no regrets. And probably again, if I had it to do over, would probably not change it a whole lot, to be honest with you.
Well, tell me about your business.
Let me see. I guess I have to throw a few one-liners at it. We have a motto that drive safely, we can wait. No service before it's time. You stab them, we slab them. By now, you know that I'm talking about the mortuary business that I've been in now for about 27 years. That's on top of the almost 20 years with the telephone company. So I'm getting near retirement age, Elena. But it's been interesting. Like my other life's experiences, it wasn't something that I'd ever thought about or planned on. About the end of my career with Mountain Bell and AT&T, I really had some other objectives in mind, and this just kind of came about. And initially, I wasn't too excited about it, but as things would work out, the more I thought about it, and the more discussion I had with the previous owners, it seemed like a good opportunity. I used to kid people when I finally got into it that, being in the funeral service profession was much like the telephone company. There's always going to be a need for it. And then I would kiddingly say that the only thing I haven't experienced is taxes. So if you've got death, telephones, and taxes, I've been in 2 of the 3 of those guaranteed professions where there's always going to be a need for it. Took a while for me from a business standpoint to really get my arms around it. I think I had been somewhat nurtured or spoiled. Telephone company had a good position, had as a line manager, had a group of people reporting to me, had a budget that I had to meet. And as long as I didn't overrun that budget too bad, it was okay. You get a slap on the hands and maybe a little bit of admonishment from your next in line supervisor, but nothing serious. When you own your own business and get involved in it, it's a different story. You overrun your budget, you're at the bank trying to borrow or find some way to make up for it.
Right.
And so I went through the first half a dozen years trying to manage like I did when I was with the telephone company, and someone had a budget that I was involved with that could help me if I overran mine. I didn't have that in my own business, and so it was a learning experience for me. And then I think too, being out on your own, there's more risks, more rewards. So you do have that, but it's just still a little bit different. You just don't have quite the security. Many years that I didn't get a weekly or bi-monthly paycheck like I did when I was with the Bell system. I'd be the last to get paid, and sometimes I didn't get paid, didn't write myself a check, depending upon the ebb and the flow of the business. And so that was a new experience for me, and one that was challenging. And I think just managing the business was probably a little greater than I thought it would be. To be honest with you, the learning to do the things to try to keep your income in and keep your expenses low, the balance of those two was something I just really didn't appreciate as much when I had someone else's budget to fall back on. And so it was a learning experience, and one that kind of the old expression, the world of hard knocks, you learn a lot when you get beat up a little bit. And I'd had to say I kind of got beat up a little bit from some of my own mistakes and my own failings to manage things as tight as I should have. But those years are behind me. Things have been different and better probably the last 2/3 of the time that I've been in business, and I've enjoyed it. I think the thing that makes it interesting in this profession, and I have a lot of interaction with ministers and church leaders, is that you're helping people through the most difficult time in their life. And I can tell you there's no greater reward than the exhilaration that comes from families who say, Elvin or Mr. Caldwell, we really appreciate what you did for us, you and the staff. You don't know how much it meant. You don't know how much you helped us, and we'll never forget it. And proof of that is I'll never forget one particular family, and I've related this story a number of times. Had a young family, a son and a daughter of a gentleman who passed, and they were out of town when he died, and they came for the funeral, and it was kind of a difficult one in the context that he died in the middle of the summer, and he died outside cutting his grass.
Oh, wow.
And in the heat of the summer, that's not good, and it becomes some kind of difficult with that. But we were able to do things satisfactorily, and years later, the son saw me out at a restaurant and came up from behind me, and I turned around and he was saying, "Aren't you Mr. Caldwell?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "You probably don't remember me." And I said, "I think I do." And he said, "I'll never forget the help you were to us with my dad." And I've had a lot of those over the years, but that one I remember so well because it was early on in my career, and there was the chance of things not going well, and we got close to that, but it ended up well, and he and I think his sister really appreciated it. And for him 4 or 5 years later to come up and being in town on a visit and to come up and go out of his way to remind me of that and the help has one I've never forgotten that. And it's an example of the warm feeling you get when you're able to have that kind of impact on a family's life and to help them get through what is undoubtedly, unquestionably the most difficult thing that they'll ever face in the loss of a loved one. So it's been a good experience for me, and one that has been rewarding for my staff, and I get written notes and thank you cards all the time, and for a while I used to keep them all until the box got so full, but I still hang on to a few of those, some of the better ones, and again, it's just nice to know that you're appreciated and that what you do has some real meaning, some real impact on people's lives, and to help them to cope with something that is as traumatic as losing a mom or a dad or a wife or a son or a daughter. It's real rewarding, and I have no regrets at all, obviously, for having made the choice to get into it, although initially reluctantly, but I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I've been there this long, and I'm glad I've had the opportunity to have been in a profession that has been this good to me and to people that I've been able to help over the years.
So originally the business was founded in 1949. Would that make it probably one of the oldest black-owned businesses?
It is one of the oldest black-owned funeral home in the city, and probably one of the oldest black-owned businesses, period, notwithstanding.
Oh, wow.
About the only person probably that might change that would be the gentleman that just walked out of here a little bit ago, Norm Harris. I know he's been around. He's a lot older than I am. But yeah, we just celebrated 60 years in September 2010, and so now it's over 60 years. And at the time we had that celebration and day of recognition, I commented to those that were there for our program and celebration that, and some of them said it for me, that it's unusual to have a business that long.
Wow.
And so it's something I'm very proud of. Feel very blessed to have been a part of it and to have been around that long. To live that long is a challenge, let alone to actually be involved in the business is that old.
Right.
So it's a good experience.
Especially having grown up here, do you feel that black businesses have faltered in Colorado? Or do you think it might be getting better?
Yeah, I think probably getting better. I can remember back in some of the business classes I took that on the average, like 7 out of 10 businesses fail within the first so many 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that over the years. Another reason why I feel so blessed and lucky that we've been around as long as we have. But I think overall today the business climate in the African American community is obviously a lot better as the population base has grown, as the variety of business opportunities have grown, as the preparation and the educational opportunities have opened up for younger people to move into business. I think it's a lot better than it was when I got started in business, and it's just because of the changing dynamics in our economy, in our community, in our country. I think it's a testimonial to the opportunities available that we could elect an African American president, and that has a trickle down effect, I think, and certainly is a motivating factor for young people and even those of us that aren't as young as we used to be to continue what we're doing. That if someone could succeed at that high a level, then we ought to be able to exceed at a much lower level. And so I think all of that has had a positive impact. And it's just not the election of President Obama, but over the years, the election of African Americans throughout the country. You know, uniquely in Denver, and you probably know this, and I'll just say it anyway, that, you know, given the small percentage of African Americans in our community, we've had a lot of elected officials. Wellington Webb, who was a childhood friend of mine, served 3 terms as mayor in a city where the African American population is much in the minority. We had the first manager of the Rockies baseball team, Major League Baseball team, was Don Baylor, an African American. We had the first 2 minority owners of a National Basketball Association team, the Denver Nuggets. Was Bernie Bickerstaff. No, Bernie was a coach. There were 2 other gentlemen that were actually minority owners 20 years ago. Again, in a community where our population is so still very percentage-wise so small. I can go on and on and on and name other examples of that where we've had very great success, even though we haven't had quite the population to support that. We're not like Atlanta or Chicago or Philadelphia or Los Angeles, where there's a large African American population base to support a candidacy or to support businesses, but yet we've succeeded here. Yeah. And I think it's just a testimonial to some of the people who have grown up here and done well, such as the Wellington Webb that I named earlier. Norm Rice was a childhood friend. Norm became the mayor of Seattle in Seattle, Washington, with only a 3 to 4% African American population base, and I guess it just speaks about, must be in the genes or in the air or the atmosphere or something. I don't know, but we've achieved well, and I'm proud of that, and proud to have been born and raised here and to see that kind of success. Some of my good friends had some of the better law firms here in the country, despite the fact, again, not a very big population base to support that. They were able to eke out a living and continue on practicing law. So a lot of examples of that, and again, I think it's just, I feel lucky to have grown up at the time that I did, to see that and experience it, and not only see the city grow, but to see our community grow and businesses in the community, and those business owners that are here that have operated outside the confines of our community. I can remember some of the sports figures in other sports that opened up businesses after they retired from some of the Bronco players, specifically opened up successful businesses outside of Denver itself, in the state, but outside of Denver. and we're very successful at it. And so a lot of that, I think, is the opportunities were there, but then a lot of it was their self-initiative by those individuals, and they're not wanting to be defeated. They want to succeed. They succeeded on the football field, succeeded in basketball, and then succeeded later on in their business life as well. And so to answer your question a long way around it, yeah, I think the opportunities are a lot better, and it's just seeing a lot more success gradually, and it's good to see that.
Wonderful.
It's good to see that.
Do you have any advice for any future leaders or future businesses?
Yeah, I do. You can tell I'm not bashful. I've always maintained that perseverance, you just have to stick at it. You have to be committed to what you want to try to do. Don't give up because of interim failures. You just have to keep at it. And I've tried to tell my own kids, some of the younger employees that work for me, that you have to persevere. You have to be persistent, and it doesn't come easy. You have to work hard at it. You can't. Nothing worthwhile in life is given to you. If it is, it isn't enjoyable. You really don't get as much out of it as if you have to work for it, Elena. I think personally, and I think if I can take any pride of success I've had myself, is it wasn't given to me. I had to work for it. And I drive a nice car, and people look at it and say, golly, that's a nice car. How'd you get that? Well, I worked 50 years to get it. Young man, you do the same thing, and you can drive a nice one just like that, too. And I use that as a classic example that nice things in life just aren't handed to you. And when that does, the enjoyment, I think, and the self-fulfillment isn't nearly what it is when you have to work for it, when you have to labor at it, when you have to kind of go through the tough times and get through those. And so you have to stick to it, have to work hard, have to be reliable, have to be on time, can't be late. I have all of that advice for young people and young too, older as well, and things I preach almost weekly and monthly with my own staff sometimes. Tell them, hey, you're not going to stay around long if you can't get here on time, and we rely upon you. We have a relatively small staff, and I had to put in writing a couple of years ago that because of that, there's a lot of interdependence, and if you're not on time and can't be here, you make it hard on your colleagues. Your work associates, they got to work harder and answer more phone calls and do things that if you were here would make it a lot easier. So a lot of that is just being a good, honest, hardworking, dependable, persevering kind of individual. And if you are and have any of those qualities or a good portion of it, chances of success are a lot greater than if you don't. End of story.
Wonderful. Was there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, no, I think it's been enjoyable spending this time with you and having a chance to chat with you. It's always fun for me. I don't mind talking about myself and my life's experience. I think you could tell that. As I said earlier, I feel like I've been almost spoiled. I feel like I've almost been blessed to have had the opportunities I've had and to have gotten where I am, and so it's always fun to talk about that. For me, I don't have any problem.
Wonderful.
Don't have any problem talking about that.
Well, it's
so.
been an honor meeting with you. I think you're a very important figure in our Black community here in Denver.
Thank you, Elena. I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but it's nice to hear you say that, and I'll take the compliment. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.